Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Just getting a lot of few people come in here, hopefully, for episode 3 of the Spartan Nation Podcast with myself and Aiden McCrone. Um, yeah, so we've got a few things on the docket today. Obviously, big news this week with Michigan State basketball. Um, Tyson Walker and Malik both deciding to come back. So we'll get into that a little bit. I'm also going to talk about the spring game this Saturday for Michigan State football, and a couple other topics that we've got planned. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully, you guys will kind of pour in here as we go. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments, and we will answer as many of those questions as we can. But yeah, so we'll just get right into it. Tyson Walker decides or announces on Monday that he's coming back for a 5th year. And then the next day, Malik releases his announcement that he's also back. So those were kind of the two big names that were question marks this offseason as far as upperclassmen about whether or not they'll come back. I think we talked about last week or the week before that we both had a fairly strong feeling that they would be back, but until you see those announcements, you don't know for sure. So I guess what was your initial reaction, Aiden, to first Tyson and then Malik deciding to return?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really surprised by either, but it does kind of show, these guys do want to come back. I think both of them see kind of the potential that they had. They had a 4 game stretch down at the end of the season where they finished strong. USC and Marquette are definitely 2 quality wins that they had in the tournament, and they fought. They were tough the whole season. A lot of games. There were some games that didn't go their way, but at the same time, um, yeah, they were really tough and gritty, and both of them were either a vocal leader or a leader on the court the whole season. So I think that's really important. And kind of going into looking ahead to next season, there's gonna be a lot of different uh kind of, I guess, question marks, because obviously this year the biggest question mark was depth. And now with Malik Hall and Walker back, you have 12 scholarship players opposed to 8. So that's definitely key. And I'd be interested to see what happens. I don't really think they're gonna go after anyone in the portal now. I think Izzo, he's talked about he likes to keep a scholarship open. So
Right.
yeah. So for that reason, I don't really think that. eh, I mean, they made calls to different players, but I don't think anyone is really in the running to come to MSU now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you too. And Izzo had a press conference today that I was at, and he talked about the difficulties of maintaining even 12 scholarship players, which is what Michigan State is at now with Hall
Right.
and Walker back. And you got to juggle egos, you got to juggle playing time. And he said it's tough to keep 6 guys happy at a time, let alone 12 or 13, because
Hmm.
you're allowed 13 scholarships. So it certainly sounds like Michigan State's roster is set for the 2023-24 season, assuming none of the current people on the roster enter the transfer portal. Obviously, Pierre Brooks has left the team, um, and announced his commitment to Butler. We might get into that a little bit later, but yeah, as far as the 12 guys that are on the roster right now, scholarship guys, it looks like Michigan State is set. And I mean, all of the initial way too early rankings, a lot of different publications came out with their way too early rankings, and I think Michigan State ranged, for the ones I used for my story, I think Michigan State ranged from as high as number 6 and only as low as like 12. So obviously expectations are high for next year, and
Mm-hmm.
that only increases, in my opinion, with Walker and Hall back in the fold because of just with Walker, you have that go-to guy at the end of games. At least he was this last year for Michigan State, a guy who can score at all 3 levels, really good in the mid-range. I mean, how many crossover pull-up mid-range jumpers did he hit, especially late in games last year? And so he's kind of taken on that role as the late game guy for Michigan State. So, and he's your leading scorer. So obviously the um, the way he played this year, that speaks for itself as how important it is to get him back. As far as Hall, obviously he dealt with injury this year, and Izzo confirmed today that he had surgery on that injured foot. He said he called it a minor surgery on that injured foot to get some things corrected, and that after the procedure, the doctors kind of reassured him that he shouldn't have any difficulties with that going forward now that they've
Mm-hmm.
corrected some things. So that's good to hear. And hopefully that comes to fruition next season. Izzo also said today that he really did see a leap this past, like last summer, from Malik Hall from his junior to senior years, but we weren't able to see that on the court because of just the injuries that he dealt with. So I'm intrigued by what Malik Hall will bring next year. I'm intrigued by where he'll be in the lineup and in the rotation with that talented recruiting class coming in. So still some things to be worked out, of course. I mean, we've got to go through summer conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
The guys have to start playing together. Like you got to build some chemistry with these younger guys, and there's a lot to shake out over the next 6 to 7 months. But expectations are high, and there's no reason to think that Michigan State won't be one of the competitors for in the Big Ten and potentially for a national championship too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Um, so do you have any other thoughts on Hall or Tyson coming back?
I mean, not really. I mean, I'm pretty sure like I mean, everyone said, what the expectations are for next year, obviously, top 10, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people on Twitter talking about, book your tickets to Phoenix for Final Four
Right.
already. So, I mean, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself about that, but I do see there's a lot of potential. I mean, you look at kind of all the teams nowadays, like starting just past the COVID season. So starting with Baylor, Kansas, and now UConn, just having experienced guards goes a
Right.
long way and matters a lot. And all those three teams won the tournament because of it. So yeah, I mean, having that whole backcourt back and really the only contributor leaving being Joey Hauser, will definitely go a long way for next year.
Right. Just gonna put out a quick message to those who are watching. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask those. We actually do have one from Cameron McGregor here. He says, "Glad to have Tyson Walker and Malik Hall back for one more season. Any news on Joey?" Um, no official news on Joey, but again, it's pretty well established that he's not expected back for next year. So it would be at this point shocking if he does come back. So
Mhm.
I think we have a pretty good understanding of that. So um, with that, we can kind of move on. I've got actually quite a bit lined up for today's show. I'm hoping that we can get through it
Okay.
all. So we'll move through to the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is Michigan State football's spring game slash open practice slash scrimmage that is going to be happening this Saturday at Spartan Stadium, starting at 2 o'clock. Mel Tucker did confirm on Monday at his press conference that they're sticking with the open practice format as opposed to a traditional spring game. So they will not be splitting the football team up and going green versus white, like we've seen in years past with D'Antonio and things like that. Under Tucker, Michigan State, I don't believe has had one traditional spring game yet, um,
Nope.
which is well. What was your reaction to it, that Aiden, when you heard that news?
Yeah, I mean, again, not really surprised. He's done it 2 years in a row already. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't really know how to think about it. Obviously, you do want to see a scrimmage and some live action, kind of. But I mean, practices is what they do pretty much every day. It's kind of their more day to day routine. So you get to see that, which is kind of interesting because obviously, I mean, a lot of people only see the end product on Saturdays. Um, but really they spend most of their time, doing like position groups and kind of uh offense, defense related stuff. So I guess it is a little interesting if you're kind of like a football enthusiast to see their day-to-day practices, kind of routines, and take bits and pieces away from that. And you get to see more reps from every single player as well. So I think that's a piece that I think Tucker has in mind. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at about it. I'm indifferent, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll be like, my honest reaction was disappointment. To be
Yeah.
honest, I was at the press conference on Monday, and after hearing about how Michigan State had 19 available offensive linemen between scholarship and walk-on guys available at the beginning of spring practice, my gut instinct was, okay, well, they'll be able to have a traditional spring game uh, on April 15th, and we'll get to see what that looks like for the first time under Tucker. And so I was a bit disappointed when he announced that it was going to be more of a open practice format with some scrimmaging in the second half, similar to what they did last year. And he said this wasn't like, he didn't point this out as like the only reason why they're not doing the split squad scrimmage, but he did point to not having enough healthy bodies on the defensive line, as a reason for that, and how, like, he and his coaching staff, they want to be able to evaluate guys, um, in a competitive environment, but one that like makes sense, and one that they can see guys strain on every play and win their one-on-ones. And he just didn't think that was possible with the split squad format. And I get that. Like, I understand. I'm not going to sit here and say that I know better than Mel Tucker about his own team, and that's just not true. But I was disappointed. Um, and I don't know what the fan base is, like, where their meters at on that. If they were like geared up for a spring game, or if it was more indifference, or what, after last season. But just my personal take on it was, I'm disappointed. I understand it. I get it. Uh, and I will say about last year's open practice, I did enjoy getting to see all of that and the individual work. But then they did enough scrimmaging in the later parts that kind of, made it worth going, made it worth seeing. Um, Last year it was interesting. Peyton Thorne was pretty well established as the starting quarterback, but with Caden Hauser coming in, and I'm trying to remember if Hamp Fay was still a quarterback at that time. I think he was.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, the kind of the big question last year was, okay, who's going to be the number two guy? Noah Kim, Caden Hauser, or Hamp Fay? And so it was fun to kind of evaluate those three guys as they went through some throwing drills and things like that. Of course, you're not going to find out who the guy is in one day of
Right.
practice, but it gives you a chance to make your own inconsequential evaluations, I guess. But then this year, the starting job is on the line, not based on one practice, but throughout this off season. So We'll get a chance to see um, Peyton Thorne, Noah Kim, and Caden Hauser go through all of those drills again, and interested to see that. Obviously, um, the offensive line too. The O line coach Chris Kapilovich talked about young guys like Keyshawn Blackstock and Stanton Ramil and Cole Dellinger, and pointed them out as guys who were already kind of turning heads in practice, even as first year guys at Michigan State. So I'm interested to see what those guys look like as well. Is there anything we're going to be there on Saturday? Is there anything maybe outside of those two topics that I brought up, quarterback and O line, that you're interested in seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think running back is probably the biggest thing for me.
Okay.
You have Nathan Carter, Jalen Berger. I mean, it's weird because he doesn't get a lot of playing time, but you do hear the coaches talk about Davion Prim.
Right.
Um, like you've heard him, heard his name, the last couple years, and yet we haven't seen anything. So I mean, maybe that's an interesting like kind of goes under the radar type of guy that maybe gets a little bit more playing time this season. Um, yeah, so I think that's another like open job that's really important. Obviously receivers outside of Coleman and Mosley
Right.
are the two big ones. So yeah, I guess I'd take the fun positions to watch running back and receiver for those.
Yeah, for sure. Also get maybe a better or a closer look at Jim Salgado coaching up the corners.
Hmm.
Last year, Tucker kind of took that position under his wing. So we'll get to see what a little bit of his coaching style and how he runs things. Dyron Reynolds on the D line, replacing Marco Coleman. So a couple new coaches that we'll get our kind of our first look at coaching up their position groups. So a couple more, obviously, to keep an eye on there. Um, we'll move on to this. I saw a question on Twitter, and I want to give credit where it's due. So I'm gonna look for that tweet real quick. But the question was essentially, what would you give up or sacrifice for this football season for Izzo to win his second national championship this coming year? So, in other words, how bad of a football season would you expect, or would you accept, in order for Izzo to win his second national championship in basketball? So, I will pose that question to you, Aiden, while I look up the author of this tweet. So, what's your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, considering UConn football has been terrible for as long as I can remember, and they won 5 national championships in 25 years, I think, um, honestly, anything is acceptable for me. I think um, yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of coaches that have 1 national championship, but having 2 would really solidify Izzo as one of the greats. Um, so I mean, not that he isn't already, but it really would just show like he did it also about 25 years apart too. So that just shows the longevity as well. So honestly, a national championship is, a national championship and that's with you forever. So if MSU went 0-12, like, there's no hard feelings, towards the football program, but yeah, it's a national championship, and that really trumps everything.
Funny because like when I saw this question and I did look it up, it's Real Shardy is his at the Real Shardy on Twitter. His name's Anthony. So giving credit to him for posing the question, and we're just kind of piggybacking off of that. Um, it's funny, like when I saw that question, that's immediately where my mind went to, was like, I mean, 0-12. Like, if they don't win a game, but you guarantee a national championship, and not just a national championship, but Izzo's second national championship, almost a, almost a quarter decade after his first. So just kind of validating. I mean, not that he needs validation. Let's be clear about that. Izzo doesn't need
Mhm.
validation, but just to further validating
Right.
just his tenure at Michigan State. And um, let's see, the first national championship came in year 4 or 5 for Izzo. I think his
Yeah,
first year
I think it
was.
was like I think it was year 4.
I think it might have been year
Yeah, something
4,
right
because
around
I
there.
think 96, 90.
Right.
If I'm right, 96, 97 was his first year, and they won it in 99 and 2000. So I think that's year 4. And not that Izzo is like at the tail end of his tenure now, but certainly late in his tenure. So to bookend the tenure with 2 national championships would be a pretty good deal. So that's kind of where my mind went initially. Also, was if Michigan State went 0-12 in football, but it guaranteed a national championship in basketball, I think most people would accept that. Now,
Yeah.
then I looked at the schedule again, the football schedule, and I was thinking, man, you open with Central Michigan and Richmond's an FCS team, so you're accepting an FCS loss if the answer is 0-12 in order to win the national championship. Does that change anything?
Um, Not really, honestly. I think again, there's no hard feelings to those players or coaches, but I mean, I would say if the roles were reversed, if it was, would you accept the MSU football national championship if, you know, MSU basketball like didn't win a game, they went 0-35 or whatever, I'd say I'd do it in a heartbeat. Like like a national championship is just, especially for MSU, who is, a blue blood basketball program. It just, yeah,
Right, and
it's different.
maybe a more realistic comparison would be like going 0-20 in Big Ten play or something like that if you're the
Right.
basketball team.
Yeah.
So, but you even took it a step further in every game, losing to Oakland for the first time in the school history in order to win the
Yeah.
football national championship. Hey,
Yeah.
like you said, a national championship is the peak of any collegiate sport. So
Mhm.
to arrive there, and for in football's sake, the first one since 1966.
Yeah. Yeah. Long time.
Long time. So understandable. Well, I just, like, again, I thought that was an intriguing question. If there's
Mhm.
anybody who's watching who has a thought on this topic, feel free to share your answers in the comment section about how bad of a football season would you be willing to sacrifice, or in order for Izzo to win a second national championship. Go ahead and throw that down in the comments, or vice versa. For a college football playoff championship for Tucker and the boys. How bad of a man? I tell you what. Given the excitement level for Michigan State basketball, if we're gonna stay to this year, can you imagine? I can't even, like, it's not even realistic, so it's hard to even imagine,
Mhm.
like, uh, them going 0-20 or having a terrible season with the just the level of expectation that there is for the basketball season. But thought that was a fun topic. Figured we would throw
Mhm.
that in the show. Um, oh, we've got an answer here from Cameron. I'll throw it up. Question is, would you rather see a national championship in football or basketball in the next 2 years? So he's 54, still waiting for his first football national championship. So there's an intriguing question. Aiden, would you rather see a national championship in football or basketball?
I gotta say football for this. I mean, I grew up in pretty much the best era for MSU football,
Right.
the D'Antonio era. And I mean, thinking about it, if we're talking about the next 2 years to win one, that means MSU would have to beat Michigan, who is right now at their best for the first time in decades, and then Ohio State, who, you know, obviously they haven't beaten Michigan the past 2 years, but are
But they're
still
still
really
elite.
good.
Yeah.
And then you have Penn State, who, I mean, I might have them, I might think of them higher than a lot of other people, but I think they are, this might be James Franklin's best team yet.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm with you on that too.
so I mean, yeah, just all that, uh, just taking that all in, saying they would, at least, you know, win all of those games or near all of those games, and then win, two playoff games. So I mean, I think I'd take that, um, definitely over basketball. But I mean, it's close, but I'd still take
Sure.
football.
Yeah, it's just a couple of thoughts that I have, reacting to what you just said. First off, just about Penn State, they get to Michigan at home this year. They do have to go to Ohio
Mhm.
State. It's very easy to picture a scenario where Penn State beats Michigan at home, Michigan beats Ohio State again at home, and then Ohio State beats Penn State in Columbus, and all of a sudden there's a three-way tie. Like that's
All
a
right,
very real possibility this year. I
definitely.
would not be surprised at all by that. Um, so that was one thought that I had. Another with just I'm kind of with you too with football. Um, just because a couple different things. First off, as I said before, Izzo doesn't need the validation of a second national championship. It would kind of launch him into another realm of maybe head coach like all time to have multiple national championships. Like all of a sudden you're right there with Jay Wright, and maybe I mean they're probably comparable with Jay Wright just because he wasn't at Villanova as long as Izzo was at Michigan State. But it does move you into that category of a multi-time national championship winner if Izzo were to win another one. But I don't feel like he needs the validation. Whereas Mel Tucker, like he needs to validate that he's the guy here. Like I still believe that he is the right guy for the job. But after a 5-7 record last year, like he has a lot of validating that he has to do. So I mean, talk about a validation. Like that 10-year, $95 million contract that a lot of people like to scoff at and get angry about. Wouldn't be high enough if he wins the national championship. Like
Yeah,
throw more money at him if he wins the national championship. So
right.
just for that reason alone, I think a football national championship would be more meaningful. Another thing would be, nothing against UConn, nothing against the teams that were in the Final Four this year, but we just had a Final Four that had a 4 seed, 2 5 seeds, and a 9 seed. There's a lot of randomness to that, but it's also
Mhm.
like you can argue that UConn was the best team in the country this season, but Alabama had a pretty good argument for that. Kansas had a decent argument for that. Um, Gonzaga wasn't what they were maybe the last couple of years, but they were a good team. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think of just the 1 seeds.
I mean, yeah, Purdue was a
Purdue,
yeah,
yeah,
Purdue and
won the Big
Houston.
Ten by 3 games, and so I feel like the national championship in basketball is much more random. You
Yeah,
still like you have to be good. You have to have good guard play. You have to have what is it like a top 20 offense or and then a top 40 defense or vice versa.
yeah, it's the other
Efficiency
way.
wise, yeah, efficiency wise. So you have to be really good in order to win a national championship. But like in football, since the playoff, there's been what 5 different national champions: Bama, Ohio State, LSU, Georgia, Clemson. I think that's it.
Yeah,
Like those are the ones who have
yeah.
won national championships over the last um see 14. So 9 years, almost a
8
decade of
years.
the playoff. Like 5 different programs have won one.
Mhm.
And you can go back prior to that in the BCS and Bama adds a couple more to their resume. You throw Auburn in there, you throw LSU or Florida State. So a couple
Mhm.
more, but like winning a national championship in football is so difficult. Like that's kind
Right.
of one of the reasons why um, I expected the football team to take a small step back from 11-2 from 2021 to 2022. I was thinking I was around 8 or 9 wins is where I was thinking. Obviously, they didn't live up to that, but like I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit when I heard some of the national championship talk from Michigan State players, maybe a coach or two, and then the fan base kind of ran with that. Some of the fan base, not the entire fan base, but
Mm,
like it's so hard to win a national championship in football. So
yeah.
uh, so yeah, that would be my answer too. Would be football. Um, moving on. This was a question that I haven't shared with Aiden yet, but I wanted to throw it at him because I wanted to get kind of that first. Um, didn't want to give him time to think about it. So right after Michigan State is done with the open practice / spring game on Saturday, the transfer portal is going to open again. There's a spring window. So here's my like burning question for you, Aiden. When the transfer portal opens for that spring window, and it's from April 15th until April 30th, so the second half of the month, will one of the three quarterbacks in the race enter the transfer portal? Either Peyton Thorne,
I
Noah Kim, or Caden Hauser.
I had a feeling where this was going.
All right,
Um, that's tough. I think yes. I don't think the coaches are gonna want any of the three of them to leave, but I
sure,
think there's gonna be one of them that will see the writing on the wall. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see um a couple other guys like linebackers or receivers leave too. I think there could be some other um key players that will surprise us that will leave. But going back to the quarterback, I think yeah, I can definitely see that. Um I mean, I think all three of them have really bought into the culture and really they really like playing for Jay Johnson. Obviously, he's the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator, so I think they really buy into his system as well. Um but at the end of the day, all those guys are competitors and they're competing for a starting job, not to be the backup. So, there might be some greener grass somewhere else, and some playing time for someone else, whether it be, a group of five school or maybe a smaller power five.
sure.
But yeah, I think yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But I do think there will be one. Um, And honestly, I I think it's gonna come down to Hauser or Kim. I don't think it's gonna be Thorne if one of them leaves. But yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat too. Like somebody a couple weeks ago, Jay Johnson had media availability, and he said, that all three guys were getting pretty much equal reps and things like that. Um, and again, the spring game or open practice or whatever you want to call it, they're calling it Spartan Kickoff or Spartan Football Kickoff, which I thought was kind of weird that you're not just calling it the green and white game or whatever. I thought that was strange, but somebody has an inkling, I believe, or will have an inkling that they're in third place, and whoever that guy is obviously going to have there's going to be a pretty strong pull to the portal for that guy. Maybe that'll be this spring when the spring window opens. Maybe it won't be until later. I don't know when the next opening is for the portal or next window is for the portal, but maybe it won't be until then. But it is hard. It is tough to imagine that Michigan State is going to have all three of those guys on the roster for the 2023 season. It would be a good thing. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, you can never have too many backup quarterbacks for sure. Like, you want to have one established starter, absolutely. But depth at quarterback is so rare now in college football. So if you take all three of those guys into the season, you're feeling really good about the position as a whole. I would imagine. Um, And yeah, like if we're talking specific guys, the easy one is Noah Kim, just because, like I said, most of us kind of expect it to come down to Peyton Thorne or Caden Hauser, because Thorne has the experience and Hauser has the quote unquote upside because he's a former 4-star in top, 300 recruit. So Kim definitely gets overlooked. He actually had media availability, I think yesterday. I haven't watched his interview yet, just because it's been kind of a crazy week. But definitely wanted to get his insight into those things, and I'll watch that maybe later tonight or later this week. But so he would be kind of like the easy one to throw out there. But I don't want to like just wildly speculate either, because I mean, shoot, I still think it would be hilarious if Noah Kim just wins the competition and surprises all of us. That would be kind of
Mhm.
funny in my opinion. But so yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Um, you brought up other uh, position groups, and I don't want to get into specific names because I don't want to act like we're speculating or we know things that we don't. But are there certain position groups that either you're concerned about maybe losing some guys, or wouldn't be surprised for certain groups to lose a guy or two to the portal during that spring window?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the first one that comes to mind is linebackers because, there's only two linebacker spots, and MSU, they're returning, Cal Halliday, Darius Snow is coming off an injury. You have guys like Aaron Brule. Um, you get, a lot of people talking about Jordan Hall being a guy coming into spring that's been, showing flashes of potentially getting playing time. Jacoby Windman. You have other guys who like former 4-star Ma'a Ot, I think that's how you say his last name. But anyways, again, like it's two spots for all of those guys. Obviously, they'll rotate, but again, I just named like 6 or 7 guys. So I mean, like you said earlier, Izzo talked about he can barely keep 6 guys happy. Football, you got 85 scholarship players,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's definitely hard to keep that many guys happy. So for that reason, yeah, I think linebackers, I think receivers. I mean, we've seen a lot of Jerron Glover in a lot of in some spring videos and kind of some clips that they've shown. So I mean, maybe he's the number 2 or number 3 guy for at receiver this year. And that might, eliminate a couple other players. Um, from a starting spot, so that might trigger them to leave. So we'll see.
Right. I just kind of laughing at my own comment down there too, because I hope like an entire position group doesn't enter the transfer portal. That would be pretty bad for Michigan State. But no, like on a more serious note, um, unfortunately in modern college athletics and college football specifically, the more depth that you have at in a position group, the more susceptible you are to losing guys to the portal. Now, I'm mostly pro player on a lot of these topics. I am okay with the one-time transfer rule. Um, I'm not okay. Like, if we're gonna get into that debate, like, I don't want like just open borders all the time. Like, you can transfer as many times as you want. I'm a little bit more traditional in that sense. Like, yeah, if one-time transfer, no penalty, but like after that, I think you should sit out, because like clearly you're not making great decisions or something. Like you gotta take more time to make your
Yeah,
decision. Um, so I'm cool with the one-time transfer. I'm definitely pro NIL for players. I don't love pay for play, which is going on in recruiting. And people like programs aren't even hiding it, and it's going on. I don't love that, but like I'm all for players being able to benefit and earn a profit off of their name, image, and like this. They put in the work to get to a position or a school where they can um like they've put in the work to be able to do that. And so if they get money to sign autographs and be in commercials, like I'm all for it. Um, but it is unfortunate some of the side effects that come with it, which is, players do make poor decisions when they some players do make poor decisions when they enter the transfer portal, and there's plenty for every Joe Burrow who goes from Ohio State to LSU and completely blows up in his second year and ends up being the number one pick in the NFL draft. For every one of those stories, like how many stories are there of guys entering the portal and they're just never heard from again? Whole
Right.
lot more of those type of players. And Izzo talked about that in his media availability today too. But you don't ever hear about that because they're just out of the news. So hopefully there will be some tweaking to maybe and I think there already has been with these like certain windows, like the spring window for the transfer portal. There's already been some tweaking to that. NIL needs, in my opinion, some structure and enforceable structure too, not just structure for structure's sake, but something that you can actually enforce that is, and you find a middle ground that is beneficial for the student athletes, but also um, you got to do something about this blatant pay for play that's going on in high school recruiting, in my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion. Do you have a different opinion? I'm
I
willing to
mean,
hear it.
I don't. I think in my opinion, I think pay for play has been going on way before it was, before NIL. So I
Absolutely.
think that it's not really a new thing. It's just kind of they've weaponized it
Sure.
per se for with NIL. So in that sense, I mean, I think every team does it. I don't think there's not a team that wins a single football game every year that doesn't do pay for play to some extent.
Sure.
And obviously NIL is, it's big, and I think that that's very important for players and stuff like that. I think regarding the transfer stuff, I think yeah, I'm kinda with you on that, like, I understand the one-time transfer rule, like, I like that, but I think, honestly, if if a kid is going to 4 schools in 4 years or, like, 4 schools in 5 years, that's on the coaching staff
Yeah.
to not to realize that, like, "Hey, maybe this kid is just flaky," or something like that, and, like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be doing that. I think that after, maybe your 3rd transfer, that might be on the coaching staff's evaluation of that player. And I mean, yeah, we're only in year, what, 2 of NIL,
Sure.
I mean, I think it'll still work its way out. I think, um a lot of these estimates that players are getting, you see some, like, I first thing that comes to mind is Tennessee's collective. They're paying that, Nico Ilumiava, or I can't really pronounce his name, the 5-star quarterback. They're paying
Yeah.
him $8 million for 4 years. And, there's other collectives trying to offer millions. I don't know really how realistic those numbers are. I think those numbers will definitely go down over time, and it'll work itself out. And I think people were really just burning a hole in their pocket to spend that money that was once pay for play, now just pay it in NIL. So yeah, that's kind of my little speech there, but
Sure.
but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Kind of on a similar topic or the same topic, but I'm a big fan of. I'm going to plug a different show, which I shouldn't do because they're not paying me anything to do this. But I do like Josh Pate, who works for
Yeah,
24/7
same.
Sports.
Right.
He's got a great. It's called Late Kick with Josh Pate. It's really good. If you're a college football fan, go follow him on Twitter and go subscribe to his YouTube channel because it's just really good content if you're a college football fan. So anyway, he was at Penn State yesterday and had a sit down conversation with James Franklin. Um, I listened to it on the way to East Lansing today. for Izzo's media availability, and they talked about, um, to your point, the fact that pay for play has been going on since college ball, or for a long time in college football. I thought it was interesting. I think it was Franklin who said, um, the programs who have kind of always done that. He wasn't going to name anybody, but programs who have been doing that for a long time, in his opinion, had a head start on the rest of the country because they had been already in that world for so long. And so you legalized it for them, and they didn't really have to change a whole lot structurally because this was already going on. Whereas other programs who, um, maybe played things by the book, all of a sudden they're telling their boosters, "Hey, all of a sudden we can do this now, and it's not against the rules." So you take 3 or 4 decades of, "Hey, these are the rules. This is what we have to follow," and then overnight it's like brand new set of rules, very few rules. And so I thought that was just interesting. If you go, again, plugging another show, but if you go check out his interview, Josh Pay's interview with James Franklin, I thought that they did a good job of kind of exploring that from a coach's perspective, um, and just that world of NIL and pay for play. Um, yeah, so I think that's just about what I had on the docket for tonight. Any thoughts on Pierre Brooks going to Butler, or choosing Butler as his next destination, Aiden?
Um, yeah, I think, I mean, we talked about this before, but just kind of the MSU players that have transferred in years past recently, just kind of finding your level. And I think, the Big East still a good tough conference,
Mhm.
definitely a level down from the Big Ten. I say that even though UConn won the national championship, but
Yeah,
still, just top to bottom. But again, yeah, just finding your level. Thad Matta is the coach there, and I
right.
kind of thought about that. I was like, I wonder if Izzo made a call for him or something like that, just to kind of vouch for Brooks. Um, but yeah, I think that's a program that could use a player like him, and I think that will really give him an opportunity to develop because that team was around. I mean, I randomly watched Butler quite a few times this year, and
Okay.
they have a decent amount of portal players that they've used pretty well. And they finished. I think it was a little bit under 500 or like
Yeah, I think it
around
was
500.
14 and 18 is what I saw when I read a
Yeah,
different story about Pierre Brooks transferring. So I think
yeah,
14 and
and
18 was their record.
they had some big wins too. I think they beat Marquette, and I think they had another like kind of top 25 win, and then they had some bad losses, like they lost to Georgetown,
Hmm.
which they were really bad this year. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, I think the biggest thing for him is just, he's looking to find his level, and I think it definitely could be there. And yeah, I mean, I wish him the best. I don't really have much else than that.
sure. No, I mean Georgetown's been pretty much a train wreck ever since they lost to Florida Gulf Coast in the
Right.
as a 2 seed. I don't know what year that was,
Yeah.
like 2015 or something like that.
Hmm.
And it's been pretty rough at Georgetown ever since. Um, but yeah, as far as Pierre, obviously Butler, the name kind of jumps out a little bit just because they've been kind of a NCAA tournament darling, um, in years past. I couldn't believe it in that same story that I read, that it's been 5 years since they've made the tournament. I thought, or this was the fifth year in a row. Of course, we had the COVID year, but it was kind of surprising that Butler hasn't been in the tournament for that long, because they played for two national championships. Yeah,
Yeah,
UConn and then
back to
Duke,
back
right?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely strange that they haven't been in the tournament. Um, but yeah, hopefully that is a good landing spot for Pierre. Like you, just the fact that Butler's coached by Thad Matta does jump out at you, because he had a great run at Ohio State, won multiple Big Ten championships, played for at least one national championship, lost to Florida. in I think '07. Have to double check, but I think it was in '07 that they lost to Florida. Florida won back-to-back years. I know that, and one of them
Yeah.
was against Ohio State. And then Thad Matta steps aside for health reasons, um, and this was his first year at Butler, and they go 14-18. It's right around 500, like you said. Upset a few teams, lost to some teams they shouldn't have. So I'm kind of intrigued to see maybe what Thad Matta can do there, just because of the success that he had at Ohio State. And as always, like, you never want to see kids, or call them kids, college athletes fail. Like when they
Hmm.
leave Michigan State, like you're not rooting against those guys. I mean, generally. So hopefully, like I said, that's a good landing spot for Pierre, and that he can find um, that development, more playing time, that it works out for him.
Hmm.
Tucker or Izzo wasn't asked about specifically about Pierre's transfer today, and it's probably one of those things that you wouldn't get into a whole lot anyway. But to your point, I was also intrigued. I wondered if uh, there was a discussion between Izzo and Mata, maybe Mata reaching out and inquiring, and then Izzo providing some feedback, or like you said, maybe Izzo reaches out and says, "Hey, this is a guy who just can't fit into the rotation here, and that's why he's transferring out, but he would be a good
Hmm.
fit for you guys." It would be interesting to know maybe what went behind the scenes there. But all right, I think we're going to call it a night right there. We went for just over 50 minutes, and yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I've been enjoying doing this. This is our third podcast. Gonna try to stick to this, like maybe one podcast per week through spring and summer. Content's going to get a little bit thin during the summer months, so we'll see if we have enough content to support um, this going forward, and then maybe ramp it up a little bit more once football gets a little closer. But I'm enjoying it. Hopefully, Aiden's enjoying it. Uh, Hopefully, you guys are enjoying it. So we'll see you next time. Take care.